PPPs continue to be a major talking point as government and the private sector strive to mobilize investment in infrastructure development. The second in a series of three on the pros, cons, and prospects of triple Ps in South Africa, I'm going to be talking to Patrick Hirsch, who heads Bowmans Project Finance Practice, about the possible ways to maximize the potential of PPPs to deliver much needed infrastructure. Patrick, the last time we spoke, you mentioned the need for collective effort for the development of sustainable infrastructure. Who exactly are the drivers of infrastructure PPPs, and who is best placed to catalyze their revival?
Well, Smita, as the name suggests, there are two principal groups in any infrastructure PPP. There's the public sector, being government and its various institutions and bodies, and the private sector, usually profit-maximizing businesses seeking returns. The public side can be further distinguished into two broad categories. One is the institution that will actually be procuring the relevant goods or services, for example, the Department of Transport in the case of ports or rail infrastructure. And the second type is the government bodies responsible for legislating and regulating and for performing monitoring and supporting functions. National Treasury, through its PPP unit, has a central role in this regard. It is responsible for assessing projects and providing the Treasury approvals required for PPPs. And it is therefore understandably taking the lead in the public sector when it comes to reviving PPPs. We anticipate, however, that Infrastructure South Africa, an agency housed in the IDC, will soon be equipped with the necessary legislative mandate to play a critical role in performing infrastructure development. The Infrastructure Fund, administered by DBSA, also has a critical role to play in funding the preparation of projects.
Presume then that the private sector has a huge contribution to make?
Yes, on the private side, there are also a number of key participants. Leaving aside the myriad professional advisors and consultants such as yours truly, they can broadly be categorized as developers, operators, equity investors, and financiers. All of these operate as individual business entities, but there are certain associations to which they belong and through which they are making a collective effort to identify challenges and come up with solutions. Many of the challenges do call for legislative and structural reforms in the framework, and as such lie within the ambit of the government sector. However, there are plenty of interested parties in the private sector who have the skills and resources to assist with guidance, analysis, and proposals, and the skills and resources that are required, not only when it comes to what reforms are needed, but also in the implementation of the reformed framework.
I would then imagine that it is important that these critical players are aligned on the main challenges to PPPs being successfully deployed.
Yes, absolutely. And I believe that ensuring that alignment shouldn't present a major challenge in itself. A recent study by a prominent business association indicates that there's no lack of appetite for funding for infrastructure projects, but rather a lack of will in the public sector to pursue procurement by way of PPPs. And this, coupled with a lack of skill and resources in the public sector, results in a lack of well-prepared and bankable projects.
Patrick, do you think government would concur with this?
Well, yes, I do. National Treasury, in an analysis of the current legal, regulatory, and institutional environment, has also identified these challenges as a fundamental cause for the drop-off in PPPs over the past decade. You see, currently, the onus for identifying and preparing projects to be procured as PPPs rests with the relevant procuring public institutions. The thing is, they are typically reluctant to pursue PPPs as the means for procurement because of the greater transparency, rigorous controls, and more demanding requirements than other means of procurement. Also, there's a certain mistrust of PPPs. Often, they are seen as a form of privatization, with the perception that they will lead to job losses in the public sector and to government losing control over essential services. Possibly, however, the most inhibiting factor is that public institutions lack the necessary capacity and expertise to properly prepare projects to be taken to the private sector market. Even with the best will in the world, they have constrained resources and lack the skills and experience required to navigate the complicated PPP process. All this is exacerbated by the lack of a political champion of PPPs to demonstrate political will and support for PPPs.
So much for the challenges, but Patrick, what about the solutions?
National Treasury and the business community have in fact come up with some very good ideas about how to address the rejuvenation of PPPs. That said, they have done so through separate initiatives. Although many of their recommendations appear to be aligned, it's possible that their separate efforts will not prove to be as effective as an agreed, combined, and coordinated solution would be. It's critical that the issues which are impeding the successful initiation of infrastructure projects as viable PPPs are addressed. And they need to be addressed jointly by government and by business if a pipeline of viable PPP projects is to be generated and if the benefits of an improved PPP framework are to be realized.
Patrick, can you give us some insights into the areas of any potential non-alignment?
The measures suggested by Treasury seem to indicate that government is contemplating the development of skills and capacity within public institutions through training and presumably recruitment. Well, as we all know, training takes time and money and does not create experience. Recruitment may not necessarily attract the right skills. Government still seems to be seeking to go it alone, rather than drawing on the existing legal, technical, and financial skills of the private sector. Government seems to see significant private sector involvement commencing only when a project is released to the market. Instead, I believe government should take advantage of the private sector's capacity in this regard and its willingness to apply its resources to project initiation, planning, and assessment.
This sounds like a sensible suggestion, but is there any track record of government working with the private sector in this way?
Yes, the success of the IPP office in South Africa renewable energy programs is a good example of government harnessing private sector capacity. The IPP office brought in a vast amount of private sector expertise from both local and foreign sources to develop its procurement program and to assist in the actual rollout of the program. It was staffed with individuals with a huge amount of experience in PPP appraisals. High quality documents were produced, deadlines were met, and a multitude of new power generation projects were successfully brought online. Clearly, government does not need to reinvent the wheel in order to revitalize PPPs. Bringing in private sector expertise before the bidding stage has proven benefits.
Thanks, Patrick. Lots of food for thought there. Undoubtedly, the private sector has a lot to offer in terms of finding ways to remove the current backlog standing in the way of a vibrant PPP investment in infrastructure. In our next episode, Patrick will give us his thoughts on the proposals that National Treasury and the private sector have made. Will they or won't they be implemented? And if they will be implemented, will they end up having the desired result?